400 warships, 200,000 warriors, 5 hours of combat so brutal that the Mediterranean Sea literally turned red with blood. October 7, 1571, the date when the largest naval battle in European history determined whether Islam or Christianity would dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. And here's what will shock you. If the outcome had been different, the entire map of Europe would look nothing like it does today. Ottoman armies would have swept unchecked through Italy. The Renaissance would have been strangled in its cradle, and the cultural trajectory of Western civilization would have taken a completely different path. Picture this: the Ottoman Empire at the height of its naval power, controlling the eastern Mediterranean like a personal lake, having never lost a major sea battle in living memory. Their galleys were faster, their admirals more experienced, their Janissary Marines the most feared boarding troops in the world. They had just brutally conquered Cyprus, and their commander boasted he would make the sea run red with Christian blood. Facing them was an alliance that shouldn't have existed. Spain, Venice, and the Papal States, three powers that had spent decades fighting each other, now forced to unite or watch their world end. They assembled a desperate fleet under a 24-year-old commander with almost no naval experience. The mathematics were terrifying. The Ottomans were favored to win. Everyone knew it. But what happened in the Gulf of Patras that autumn day would shatter Ottoman naval supremacy forever and change the balance of Mediterranean power for the next 3 centuries. To understand why this battle mattered so desperately, we need to witness the atrocity that finally pushed divided Christian Europe to unite. In 1570, the Ottoman Empire decided to seize Cyprus, Venice's most valuable colonial possession, an island fortress that controlled eastern Mediterranean trade routes. The siege of Famagusta, Cyprus's capital, lasted 11 brutal months. The Venetian garrison under Marco Antonio Bragadino held out with desperate courage, hoping relief would come. It never did. By August 1571, starving and with ammunition exhausted, Bragadino negotiated surrender terms. The garrison would be allowed to leave with military honors. The Ottoman commander, Lala Mustafa Pasha, agreed. It was a lie. When Bragadino and his officers arrived to formalize surrender, Ottoman soldiers seized them. What happened next shocked even the brutal standards of 16th century warfare. Bragadino was tortured for days, his ears and nose cut off while he was forced to watch his officers beheaded one by one. Then, in the city square with thousands watching, he was tied to a post and flayed alive. His skin peeled from his body in strips while he was still conscious. He survived this torture for hours before finally dying. His skin was then stuffed with straw, dressed in his Venetian commander's uniform, and paraded through Ottoman territories on a donkey before being sent as a trophy to the Sultan in Constantinople. Can you imagine that level of calculated cruelty designed to break enemy morale? News of Bragadino's torture spread across Europe like wildfire, carried by horrified Venetian survivors. The details were so shocking that even Protestant states that normally viewed Catholic Venice's problems with indifference were appalled. This wasn't just war, this was a message. The Ottomans were declaring that Christian resistance would be met with horrors beyond imagination. In Venice, the reaction was rage mixed with terror. The city's wealth came from Mediterranean trade, and Cyprus had been their most important eastern base. Its loss was catastrophic economically. But Bragadino's torture transformed the situation from commercial disaster to existential holy war. Venice's ambassadors traveled to every European court with one message. Today it's Cyprus, tomorrow it's Crete. Next year it could be Sicily or even Venice itself. The Ottomans won't stop until they control the entire Mediterranean. But Venice couldn't fight the Ottoman Empire alone. They had tried before and lost. They needed allies, specifically Spain, which possessed Europe's most powerful navy. But Spain and Venice had been rivals for decades, competing for trade dominance, fighting proxy wars. Getting them to cooperate seemed impossible. Enter Pope Pius V, an elderly Dominican monk who had become pope in 1566. Pius was not a political pope. He was a true believer who saw the Ottoman advance as an apocalyptic struggle between Christianity and Islam. He launched a diplomatic campaign with fanatical intensity, sending letters and envoys to every Christian ruler. Unite now or fall separately. This is not about Venice's interests or Spain's ambitions. This is about Christianity's survival. Slowly, impossibly, the Pope's campaign worked. Venice committed first. They had no choice, having lost Cyprus and fearing for their remaining possessions. King Philip II of Spain was harder to convince. Spain was simultaneously fighting Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, North African pirates along its coastline, and maintaining an empire stretching to the Americas. Did Spain really need another war? But Philip understood naval power. If the Ottomans achieved total Mediterranean dominance, they could cut Spanish supply lines to Italy, threaten Spain's eastern coastline, even support Muslim populations in Spain itself. Reluctantly, Philip committed to the alliance, but with one condition: he would choose the supreme commander. Philip's choice shocked everyone. Don John of Austria, his own illegitimate half-brother, only 24 years old. Don John was the son of the late Emperor Charles V and a German woman, born out of wedlock and raised in obscurity until Philip acknowledged him and brought him to court. He had virtually no naval experience. His military career consisted of suppressing a Muslim revolt in Spain's mountains. Appointing him to command the most important Christian fleet in generations seemed like nepotism bordering on insanity. But Philip calculated correctly. Don John was young enough to be bold, royal enough to command respect from proud Venetian and Genoese admirals, and, critically, he wasn't Spanish, Venetian, or Genoese, so no faction would accuse him of favoring his own nation over allied interests. By summer 1571, the impossible had happened. The Holy League was real. Spain, Venice, and the Papal States formally allied, swearing to fight the Ottoman Empire jointly. The assembly point was Messina, Sicily, a massive natural harbor where the Allied fleets would gather before sailing east. Throughout August and September 1571, ships converged on Messina from across the Christian Mediterranean, creating the largest war fleet Europe had assembled in generations. Venetian galleys arrived first, low-slung warships with distinctive scarlet sails, crewed by professional sailors who knew the Mediterranean intimately. These were Venice's lifeblood, the ships that had made the Republic rich through centuries of trade and warfare. Spanish galleys followed, heavier than Venetian designs, more guns per ship, crewed by soldiers who viewed the sea as just another battlefield to conquer. Papal galleys came painted white, carrying religious banners and priests who would provide spiritual support during battle. The assembly was chaos barely contained by organization. Messina's harbor was crammed with over 200 warships and hundreds of support vessels. Different languages, Spanish, Italian, Greek, various German dialects, created constant communication problems. Different command structures clashed. Venetian admirals, accustomed to independence, chafed under Spanish protocols. Spanish officers looked down on Venetian merchants playing at war. Genoese captains kept apart from both, nursing their own grievances. Fights broke out constantly in taverns and on docks, but underlying the friction was shared purpose. Everyone understood that failure meant Ottoman domination. Don John worked tirelessly to build unity, meeting personally with every squadron commander, attending multiple masses at different ships, learning names, sharing meals. He was charismatic and sincere, and slowly his personality began binding the disparate elements into something resembling a unified force. By late September, the Holy League fleet was ready, approximately 206 galleys plus support vessels, carrying about 84,000 men, 30,000 soldiers and marines, the rest galley rowers and sailors. The fleet's firepower was concentrated in 6 galleasses, Venetian super galleys mounting far more cannons than standard war galleys, essentially floating fortresses designed to blast enemy ships to splinters. These would be the fleet's shock weapons. But the true horror of galley warfare lay below deck, where thousands of men chained to rowing benches provided the propulsion that would drive these ships into battle. Galley slaves lived in hell, chained at the ankle, rowing 18 hours a day, sleeping at their benches, fouling themselves where they sat because they couldn't move. Many were Christian prisoners captured in previous battles. They would row the ships that fought to liberate them, unable to defend themselves if their galley was sunk or boarded. On September 16, 1571, Don John gave the order. The Holy League fleet would sail east to find and destroy the Ottoman navy. As the massive armada left Messina harbor, priests blessed every ship. Soldiers confessed their sins, preparing souls for likely death. Don John's flagship, the Real, led the way, a magnificent vessel carrying the Pope's personal banner blessed in Rome, depicting Christ crucified. The psychological warfare had begun before a single shot was fired. This was explicitly a holy war, a crusade to stop Islamic expansion. Either Christianity would hold the Mediterranean, or Islam would seize it. There would be no compromise, no negotiation, no middle ground, only total victory or catastrophic defeat. For 7 days, the Holy League fleet sailed east across the Ionian Sea. The journey was surreal, 200-plus warships moving in formation, a forest of mass covering miles of ocean.